Okay, I got it.
So amazing. So welcome and thank you so much for joining us, Mandy. I'm so excited about, just having a little bit of a conversation about where things are at and where they've been. We'll probably just get started
Yeah.
fairly quickly since your time is of the essence. um, so finding one's passion can be a lifelong journey. So what was your journey like and how did you know you'd found your passion in fragrance?
Well, I had a life before I was a perfumer. I was a psychotherapist for artists and writers, and I had written a few books. And when I thought in the beginning that I would write a novel and make my main character a perfumer, I had no idea I'd land where I am. And so I started with research. I started with books that were like 100 years old because I was only interested in naturals. I knew that. And so as I started reading the books, I got completely captivated. And then I thought, well, for this novel, I should smell materials. I should try to make something so I can write about it well. And the minute I smelled the oils, I just was completely hooked. I mean, I was completely in love. And I just got more and more obsessed with the history, the materials, the art practice. It's gone on. I'd say it's like a snowball rolling down a hill. It's just gotten more and more. It hasn't like worn out or I reached the end of it. I really, really love the materials and that whole art practice of working with them and where they are for us as people on the globe, on this planet, throughout time. I just discover more to be fascinated by.
So I mean, I'm absolutely the same. I love discovering the botanicals. Do you remember your first oil? Like, do you remember the first one that you connected with?
I remember in this first class, I took this little class at an aromatherapy studio here with a woman who was a friend at the time, and we started this business, Grandiflorum Perfumes, and we launched in Bergdorf Goodman's, which is a very fancy store. And then I lost the business and bad things happened. And I thought, oh boy, I'm really bad at business. I should never do this. But I remember the perfume I made there, and it was odd. It was a really interesting perfume. It was built around Angelica. And I kind of don't know. I always have felt the materials could speak to me. If I don't sound like a crazy person, I always felt like I was responding to them and learning about them as personalities. And so they would, which is not to say I made wonderful things, but I was very involved in wanting to improve what I'd made by responding to what the materials were doing to each other. And I think that still goes on for me. So I respond to, in the very beginning, I responded to Angelica root, which is a kind of musky, herbal, odd smell.
And so 5-year plan or follow your intuition, which best suits the way that you operate?
Always follow your intuition. I've never had a 5-year plan in my life. I don't even have a 1-month plan. Things kind of come together and they look like they've had a plan, but they don't. I think I'm very present in what I do, and I check in with myself a lot about how it's going, and I'm very honest, I think, about what isn't working. And I like to tinker. Like, I don't think anything I've done is quite good enough or finished. So, I have this little museum. I'm always improving it. I like improving my packaging. I like the art practice and the creativity to grow with me. So intuition all the way.
Yeah, I think that I'm probably the same. But it's interesting as you get into business that there's so many elements to it that you almost you grow. I found that I've grown in ways where I have had to be a bit more strategic. So yeah, it's kind of interesting as to get to natural perfumery, it was all follow your intuition. To start the practice, it was all of that. But to commercialize it, I've had to tap into other areas, which have been kind of an interesting journey for me since having started, because I just started all art, and then I've had to tap into these other areas of my expertise. So, what scent note makes you nostalgic, and where or who does it come?
Let me ask you about business, because I like business. I think business is interesting. And so I've liked it, but I have a very odd business, I think. You know, it's tiny, it's kind of willfully tiny, and I do everything. So I keep my business at the level where I can do everything, you know, with me and Foster, that we can do everything ourselves. But I find being in business incredibly interesting, and making things, or having a class, things that people take into their lives and that make them happy. I like that aspect of business a lot. So, okay, I didn't mean to cut you off.
Yeah, but maybe, so I was talking about this with someone the other day, and it was about being a teacher. So I think that, like, inherently, like, there must be that natural born teacher in where you like to learn, but then you like to then, you know, share, because otherwise you wouldn't continue to do the education side of it, I would imagine.
I feel like I love my class now. I used to teach my class live, my natural perfume class, which I've done for 20 some years, as you know, in my studio. And when COVID came, I started to do it on Zoom, and I worked out a way to do it on Zoom. And actually, even though I felt my live class was really as good as I could get it, there were things about it that bothered me, that I don't think bothered my students, but bothered me. And I got to solve them in the Zoom class. So I am so love my Zoom class, and love the way I figured out, because I like problem solving. I like to feel I'm, you know, doing the absolute best I can. So I learn in my classes, like they learn, but I learn too. And I subtly refine everything I do in class, you know, all the time. So it's a very alive kind, it's like a little bit like a perfume. It's an alive thing to me, class, that I'm always editing to try to make it better. And I like teaching.
Yeah, that core of process improvement, I think I've got a very similar connection to that. It's just constant.
We are similar.
Yeah. And I think that with the classes as well, it's amazing how much you do learn every single time. I have a keep, stop, start. So afterwards I write down all of the things that went right, all of the things that I thought I could do different, and constantly trying to look at, you know, how we can make it better for student, and also, and as an experience for the teacher. Because with my business, obviously I'm doing a training the trainer type thing, where I'm actually teaching, you know, other people how to actually do what we do. And so that has its own process improvements, which I have to totally, like, think about all of the time.
Which I think is great. I think it's a sign that your work is alive. I think it's a very interesting thing. If you do something that, you know, your heart has led you to, that's a deep practice, you always go on learning. All artists do that. That's kind of how things take place. And I think it makes life very worthwhile.
I'm definitely, the team aspect of building business is definitely probably one of my biggest challenges. So it's interesting that you've decided to keep it really, like, small and just focus.
There's just me. There's just me. And so there's no one else to teach the way that I teach in my classes. And I care about and my class is tiny. It's like 10 people on Zoom. So, but I have gone on refining the way that I'm able to teach. And I love seeing, you know, every time somebody puts natural essences together, you know, once you get past 2, it's completely different. I mean, it just goes in all these other directions. It's completely fascinating how the oils interact with each other and where they go and how you can fix that. And I think that that's really just such an interesting part about making natural perfumes.
Yeah. So if you could keep one individual scent to yourself and not share it with anyone else, what would it be and why?
I do. I have one, which is, I have a bottle of antique ambergris, and I have a bottle of antique ambrine, which is the main molecule in ambergris. And I went through an incredible journey to get my hands on it. It's too long to put in this podcast, but it was so involved, me wooing this poor whale collector for a year trying to get it from him. And then finally he sold his whale collection to a museum and sold it to me. And it is the most spectacular scent. I just have these 2 little bottles of it, and they're not very big. And yes, I keep that to myself. Yes, I do.
And do you like, so do you smell it like every day, or is it more of a once every quarter, or?
Well, first of all, I just love that it's there. It's just
Yeah.
like this, it's just this like wonderful feeling knowing it's there and knowing I can visit it and smell it. It's just this transporting, rich, I mean, ambergris itself is an amazing smell to begin with, but this old ambergris that's aged for 100 years, and then that molecule, it's this honeyed, amber, velvety, yummy thing. And I just
Sounds
love it. And
divine.
I love smelling it.
It sounds divine. One of the other questions I wanted to ask was, out of all of the isolates, there was one isolate that you kept, or could only use. What would the isolate be?
I think it would probably be phenylacetic acid because it smells like civet. It's got that animalic, sexy thing with the floral, and it's a top note. And so I really like it for the way that it kind of dirties it up on the top and makes it kind of sexy, but you can't kind of place it either because it's not totally familiar. I like that, but I really love isolates, actually. I love them and I love working with them. I feel that they allow you to add a sheer facet to an essential oil, that you can kind of play God by moving the essential oil or the absolute over a little bit, that you can make it a little more animal, let's say, a little more floral. And also, since in my experience working with them, they float around a bit more. If you put something like, say, guaiacol in the base, that smokiness is going to rise to the top. So the interaction between really good quality natural isolates and essential oils, which are like cousins, opens up the palette in a way to be even more creative. So I really enjoy working with them. I like them.
Yeah, I mean, it was amazing getting to know each of them, and then how they can share out or kind of make something more or have more depth, or but I agree, definitely that sort of floating up and liquid smoke is definitely a favorite of our team. Everyone tries to put like a little bit in.
It's so good. You know, if you read back into the 50s, because I have so many books and I read back there, when they were using isolates, and they were using more natural isolates, which the commercial perfume world uses synthetic isolates now, they were as on it about the source and the quality of the isolate as I am just working with naturals. And a natural isolate is really quite different than a synthetic isolate in the way that it's contaminated, because it has a little bit of some other molecules in them. So if you smell several indoles, or if you smell several phenylethyl alcohols, they smell slightly different. So you have that thrill of looking for the best quality and then what it does in a blend. And I feel like they really enrich the palette in a way that is wonderful to see.
Mm-hmm. With your food or the chef essences, are there isolates in the chef essences, or is it always like more of a whole essential oil?
The chef's essences are mostly essential oils. Some of them are absolutes, and then there are some compounded isolates. There are some compounded isolates that are fruit isolates, and those are compounded out of isolates and fruit juice. Those are made from isolates, those ones. So there's a whole range in there, but there's not a single isolate. Not that many isolates aren't food grade and you could use them, but I kind of don't.
Yeah, okay. And so what kind of got you into the chef essence side of it? Like, how did that sort of perfume to flavor, how did that, like fragrance and flavor kind of connection happen?
I think that I was always interested in the integrity of the ingredients, like people are in food, like finding the best tomato, or I liked high quality ingredients. And I always felt if you started with a really good essence, you had a running head start to make something good, because the essences are so complex and they have different facets, different little wings of aroma. They have, say, a dirty facet or a resinous facet, and they're good. They're just better with good materials. And I feel myself that the closest thing to making natural perfumes is cooking. So I cook, I was interested in cooking, I was interested in ingredients. It wasn't a big jump for me. And also the same materials often can be used in both places. And so it always comes back to how much I love the plant material, the plants, the essential oils, the beauty of them. And they have this profound effect on flavor, and they always did. So it wasn't a lot to make that jump for me at all.
I think I definitely through COVID became so much more of a cook. I think I used to just, always just follow recipes to the,
Yes.
to the like exactly how they are. And then because I was at home and I was cooking so much more, I did start to play around. And yeah, so grateful for your book as well, both the two books, which were so inspiring to like come up with different meals. I think I posted a few so that you shared them on Instagram. But yeah, they're so delicious.
I love that myself too. I think food is a very aromatic activity. It's like really the smell, your home fragrance is stuff cooking, or stuff you're eating, or the tea you made. It's very aromatic, the whole idea of drinking and eating, and it just seems to all come together. So they call me the flavor doctor here. My foster calls me, because I'm always in there doctoring things up a little bit. We get a little guacamole, I'm in there doctoring it up with a little extra lime oil, a little extra coriander, whatever. I'm in there. I enjoy that process. And you literally need one drop. It's not like you need a lot to have that essence of that plant. And it's just as it does in your garden, when you're around, say, a mint leaf or a basil leaf and you rip it, there you are, you're there with the essential oil. That is what's making those herbs smell so good. Or if they're in your cupboard and they've been there forever, it's why they're dead. So it just makes sense.
And tell me a little bit about your garden as well, because I know that even just when we visited during the classes, there are so many beautiful roses and flowers. And so are there lots of herbs, and how do you care for your garden?
I'm obsessed with my garden. First of all, I'm an obsessive type. So I don't get into that many things, but the things I get into, I really get into them. So I love growing roses. I grow a lot of them. I grow them for scent and for color. I love the process of how a rose unfolds, where it starts from, where it ends, and then along its process of kind of dying, the way the color changes and the smell changes and stuff. So I really, really enjoy that. I grow a lot of thyme. I seem to really, really love thyme in all of its variety. So I like that. I also have a lemon tree, which at any time of the year has kind of the petitgrain from the leaves and twigs, that it has that really wonderful blossomy odor. And then it has the lemons. I preserve lemons. I have different things out there, but it's a very sensual experience to me, having a garden and being connected to it in that way. And a lot of the smells are just very inspiring. The smells of the dirt, the smells of the leaves. When I made a rose perfume, it was very important to me to have the smell of the leaves along with the dirt, not just the blossom. I just think you learn a lot from gardening.
Yeah. No, absolutely. My dad had a garden at our beach house, and he would always tend to it. So it's just so nice to be able to eat food from your garden as well. I currently live in a high-rise building on the 81st floor, so I definitely don't have access to a garden at the moment, but in the coming years, I'm sure I will create one myself.
Or you could have a window box. You could decide you could have a little window box, and I bet the stuff in there would be super precious.
So yeah, that's a great idea. I'll definitely do that. Yeah. And so thyme also for me is so delicious. We have a favorite recipe which we make, which is leek carbonara, but it's made with the thyme. And so we probably eat that about once a week. So I'm a real fan of that herb as well. So that's interesting to hear too. And so what supports your creative process when making a fragrance? So are there any music, environment, or kind of rituals that you do when you're designing?
Yes, I love blastingly loud music. I do. I don't think I've ever made a perfume that I haven't just turned the music up so loud. It's positively deafening. I really feel like I get lost in the music, and that it sort of speaks to me with with the oils. And so it takes me to another place. And the oils, of course, working with them, you get a little high. So that takes me to another place too. So I'm very happy. And I found when I was at a very sad, grieving period in my life, when I would start to work and turn this music up and listen to it, and then smell the oils, I just start to feel better. Just my grief and my sadness would sort of just move away some. And I play music that's meaningful to me. I'm a great Bob Dylan and Leonard Cohen fan, so I play them a lot. And I, of course, think they're talking to me about life and art and everything else as I'm very busy. I get ideas. You know, when something is really profound, you just hear it in a different way depending where you are in your life. So I really like to have music playing when I work.
Yeah, I do the same thing actually when I'm doing some sort of creative brief. I get a playlist from the customer or the client, and
Yeah.
I just listen to them on repeat as I make it, and it just helps me tap and connect into the co-creation of what we're trying to do. So
Yeah.
yeah, really, really similar in that way as well.
As well.
And so how do you come up with your beautiful fragrance descriptions?
You know, I sometimes borrow from another sense. I think it's very, and I teach a lot in my class, I think it's very important that people find the words for fragrances from themselves. So I think it's very possible to borrow from other things, like it smells like a wet dog or strawberry jam or something else. I think that communicates things. I think also the best ways to describe a fragrance are compound words. So it's like, I don't know what, bright green or fleshy rose, or, you know, something where you have a modifier and another word. So it's a little bit more precise, but it's meaningful to you. And I think describing, first of all, I think marketing about describing scents is dreadful. You know, I think that it misses the point. But I think if it's really real for you and you begin to work on finding words that express what you're finding in that smell, it starts to come naturally to you. I think it's just a matter of consciousness. And also, there are no wrong answers. You know, it's not like wine where, you know, there's a vocabulary, you got to get it right. With scent, for better and for worse, people don't know their way. So it allows you to say, oh, that smells like a wet dog. And nobody's going to say, no, it doesn't. So I think it's an area of, you know, of personal creativity that's fun. It's really fun.
Yeah.
And as you get a name for smell, you remember it more. So I think that's useful.
And do you think that you've borrowed from like cooking or the way that you describe food? Or would you say that there are some like crossovers?
Total crossovers with food. And also, you know, I have that aroma wheel, you know, of mine that I'm constantly upgrading and doing whatever, trying to get it into groups and stuff. I think vocabulary is useful. I think groups are useful. I think when you put things together into groups, like all the sweet spices, I think then you can look at that little quadrant of the sweet spices, the nutmeg, the cinnamon, the ginger, and think about what words describe them as different, because they have so much in common. And as you understand things that are close to each other but different, like the different blues, you know, as you understand the difference in colors, the world opens up to you. And I think that's a very positive activity.
Yeah, I think even just when I first started and like not being able to necessarily smell the facets or the isolates inside, say, jasmine, and then as you go along, or rose, and as you go along and you can smell the phenylmethyl alcohol, you can smell the citronellol, you can smell those individual parts. So I find like that understanding it from a sensory or conceptually sensory, and then also then trying to get the language to actually do it. It sort of all happens kind of at the same time.
Yes.
Is it just the ability to smell in layers?
Yes.
Yeah. So I think but it's hard to explain that to a student because everyone comes wanting to know everything all at once.
Yes.
But it's almost like it's a process, and you just have to fall in love with that process of learning how this all works. And it's not something that you can just read off. Even if you've got a wheel, you can't necessarily read and understand, well, I'd use yuzu in this fragrance for a certain reason versus tangerine versus pink grapefruit versus, you have to kind of actually
Exactly.
experiment.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But I think once you do that, and I think that's one of the things I kind of love about class, is people do go in those different directions, and you can kind of see how pink grapefruit and yuzu and say bergamot or whatever are affecting the situation in a different way. And I think it's that process that has to hook you to be able to want to go on and do this kind of work, find that endlessly fascinating, which, we obviously do.
Yeah, absolutely. And so are people coming to you with, new ingredients and like just trying to get your input around, what like the quality of ingredients? Do people come to you, or do farmers find you, or how does it kind of work in terms of some of the ingredients, or is it the big houses, are they coming to you with new ingredients?
I get told of a lot of things, but I look around. First of all, I buy from growers myself. I buy from big people, but I buy from little people too. Yeah. And I find that I go through a kind of vetting process. If I add something that to what I offer, I have a lot of perfumers botanicals, ones that I sell, and I'm very interested. They're all very personal to me. I also am never sure how long I'm going to have them. I tend to buy the weird. I tend to buy the stuff that is a fortune. And I tend to buy things that, fall off the map. So I have this fleeting moment with a love affair with what I buy. There's one thing I really loved I could never get again. Many things, actually. So sometimes people bring me stuff or send it to me. And I'm always on the hunt. I'm a live one. If somebody's got something, they can get in touch with me. I shop, I spend, I'm interested. I'm very, very interested. But some of it is like, comes out of work I'm doing. Like, I recently got very involved with lemongrass, which I wasn't. I had been very involved with, say, Litsia cubiba as a middle note. It's a lemon. But Litsia cubiba has very, very high odor intensity that lemongrass doesn't. So I got very involved with lemongrass. I got very involved with birch tar. I had these things. All of a sudden, I started to think about them for class. And I thought, there's a lot they can bring to the table. So some of it just comes from working with the materials and seeing how they affect other things, which is an endless process of discovery. So if someone has something, I'm interested.
Yeah, I've been focusing a lot on just the Australian and New Zealand native plants, just because it's local and we can get access to it kind of easily. So yeah, it's that connection with the different oils and then how they can be used is I just absolutely love that part of the process as well.
Like, for example, I found someone who had sandalwood CO2. And I was very interested to get the sandalwood CO2 because sandalwood has now very expensive, which it wasn't when I began 25 years ago, but it is now. And it was sustainable. It was all very good, the sandalwood, and you had to pass through the government to get it out of the country. But if you put sandalwood as a CO2, it's on the top. If you put it in the base, it disappears because everything else that comes in sits on top of it and you can't find the sandalwood again. So this would be really useful. And the thing that we went through, me and the grower, to get that on the plane, because I had to rebuy. I ran out, I bought a small amount, it was expensive, and I rebought. And he and I were at the I wasn't physically there. We were at the airport together with the customs guy, with me on the phone, trying to get that onto the plane. But I like the hunt. I don't mind. It takes me 1,000,000 hours to get something. I just don't mind. I feel like I think I'm in, some olden times, doing something fascinating and interesting, but it's a hunt for most of the stuff I get.
Mm-hmm. So much fun. I've definitely had my own journey around some of that too, but being able to connect with the growers is obviously one of the most beautiful things.
Yes.
And what would you give, or what advice would you give someone trying to build their scent-based vocabulary? I know we touched on this a little bit before, but
I find your own personal words, and the compound ones are best. Find what fits for you. Don't be intimidated. just find what fits for you and start to use those words, and other words will come to you. They'll be right for you. And don't be intimidated by an odor description by an expert. Just stay with what's true for you, enjoy that process, and you'll grow.
And as a ex-psychotherapist for artists and writers, what have you observed as one of the biggest challenges that creative space, and what piece of advice would you offer to address it?
I think the hardest thing to do is to stay true to what really matters to you. I think that staying at your center, at your soul, at what's most important to you, and not being knocked off that. I think that that's at the deepest level the biggest challenge in life about everything. And the other thing is to not listen to other people. I'm a big person about not listening. Don't listen to other people about anything about your life unless you like what they did with their life. Look, turn the sound off, look at their values, see if their values resonate with you, and then learn from them. But people tell you so many things to do, and many times they're either not doing it or it's something somebody else told them. So I'm a great believer in finding your own internal compass and growing with that.
Well, I consider what I do, I get to play every day. So yeah, I created the life of my dreams. So I'm a real big believer of not listening, even to the people that love you the most sometimes.
Absolutely. I think that life is about that, is finding your way that way. And I think people have more regret about not doing that than, say, failing. I think if you fail at something that's really deeply important to you, it's better than succeeding at something that isn't meaningful to you. That's how I feel. And I feel like people like us have been very lucky to be able to find what really speaks to us and pursue that. That to me is enough. If it works, that's even better. But just being able to have that opportunity is a privilege in life.
No, absolutely. It really, really is. And I think that's one of the things as a teacher, as a space, is something that I definitely want to hold for people, is to, just have that really nice, safe space, feeling like they belong, but also to be able to, just tap into that like center for themselves. So I think with my masterclasses and the workshops, like that's exactly what we're trying to do as well. And I think what's interesting is how you have moved it to Zoom. We've only got one like virtual workshop that we do, but I still get such amazing feedback, and it's a recording, so it's not even live, but just amazing feedback, and that ability to sort of almost be in two places at once. Like, can you speak to that as your ability to hold space for more and more people around the world? Like, is there a healing aspect? Do you feel like you, as an alchemist, that you do that, or do you consciously think about it, or is it just something that is just happening or has happened?
I feel like, first of all, my class is still tiny, and I'm there. So I'm there through the whole class talking away. So I'm very hands-on, one-on-one, tiny. And my class is 10 people. So it's little. It's kind of like it was in the studio. I do feel, yes, I feel very I've always felt the most intimate with my students. I feel like the large perfume world, in the big commercial world, I don't feel especially connected there, but I feel connected to the people I've taught. I feel we've shared this very meaningful experience together, where I was the teacher and they were the student, but that comes to an end. And I feel like I've had this incredible good fortune to attract wonderful people, just really wonderful people that love the materials. So I think my larger, my being in the larger world than my teaching is my museum, which has had thousands of visitors, and I see them too, and my books. So I feel like I am me, and I go into the world that way, in that way you're talking about, where in the museum they have their experience there. I always speak to them about it, and we've grown a lot in terms of, we have a lot of visitors. But my books, they go out to a lot of people and people respond to them. I just revised Essence and Alchemy. I don't know if you knew that. I just revised it in the last month or so. And I revised the teaching because it was so old. Oh my God. So I brought it up to date. It was just terrible. But I changed the cover and I made 100 changes in the book. And I feel very good about where it is now. So I just feel like my ability to reach people that way is more global, and my students are from all over the world.
Yeah. Actually, that was the first book. A boyfriend of mine gave it to me when I was 19. So that was my first, that was when I read Essence and Alchemy. And I think it was then that I actually decided I was going to, or that it resonated with me. But it was crazy that it took till, 34 years old to actually come and see you and really experiment for the first time. And I remember using galbanum, which is still an absolute favorite of mine. I just love that oil so much. And then, and when I looked it up later on, I found that it meant New Horizons, and I was like, oh, this is so cool. And then also black currant. They were the two that I used in that first workshop. So,
and those are hard. Those are hard. Those are super high intensity and hard. A lot of people started with Essence and Alchemy. It really struck a chord in people and has gone on. So it's 20 some years old. Of course, the new version is much better. I hope you'll take a look at it. It's really better. I'm really uncomfortable with the old version now, but it's getting published in France by Ney. It's going to be translated into French, which is I'm very excited about, and into Vietnamese. It's got like 15 foreign editions, getting 2 more of the new one. So it's got a life of its own out in the world. And I feel very lucky that it resonated so much with people. Yeah.
And are you writing any other books at the moment, or what's kind of happening? Yeah. You are.
I'm writing a book about my museum, which I've been writing for the last few years, and I've illustrated it. And so it's about the exhibits that are out there, which are filled with such beautiful things. And I have a 16th century herbal. So I've painted all the plants. So people have a reference to what each plant looks like. I taught myself watercolors. And then I have this amazing book out there called the Symbolorum. And I painted all those, and they're these kind of symbols, and they're narrative. They have a kind of a moral at the end of them, and so that's many. It was the first herbal with copper plates. So you should. I'm going to show you one. They're amazing looking. I've been painting them. They look like this.
Yeah. Wow.
You should take it out.
You should take it out. Do you have a plant one I could show her over there? They have the musk deer. And they just have a story, and so I'm getting it translated. And so I'm working on a book about these materials. Do you have the blowers that people plug?
So did you take a class in watercolor, or did you just learn off YouTube?
I taught myself, and so I love these. And if you look at the new Essence and Alchemy, you'll see these two angels are on the new cover. You should get the new. Can you get the cover for me?
I'm gonna pull that up for a sec.
So that's what that looks like. And then when I made the new cover of Essence and Alchemy, I made my own Symbolorum. I took pictures, bits of the old ones, and I painted them all in watercolors and made my own image. So it says, there's the blowers. You see them on the side. They're blowing the sky around. And it says, as above is below, about alchemy.
Yeah.
So I just love it. And I'm learning about the relationship they have to plants. There's an enormous amount written about it. So I've incorporated them into my chapter headers about the book. I have a contract from a publisher for my book on the museum, Abbeville. Very excited about that. Pictures of the museum exhibits, me writing about them, and me writing about all the oils on the organ and painting what they look like. And then I want to go on and do a book on the Symbolorum.
Wow.
So busy.
No, very. And yes, I mean, everyone has to, if they're in Berkeley, California, come to your museum, because I loved my experience there, just opening up all of the drawers and like smelling all the different all the different botanicals, access to all those amazing books. And yes, the white glove, and even your new aroma cone. Like, there's so many things that you've been kind of at the forefront of kind of designing for the fragrance movement, I suppose. So yeah, how did you come to slow scent? Like, you've obviously kind of taken that on as like a new way of talking about fragrance, and what does that mean to you?
I wrote about slow scent. I coined the word 20 some years ago when I did a meal with Chef Daniel Patterson, who I did 2 cookbooks with, and we did an article for the Snail, the Slow Food magazine. And so I wrote about it as slow scent, and I wasn't certain kind of what to do with it. So I just held on to it. I had the website, I held on to it. But as you know, I teach all my students to teach. And so, and then they do what they do with it. And so I decided that it would be a good idea to call that class that my students do, that's based on my class, Slow Scent. So I do, and I look at my teaching as slow scent, and I'm still forming what to do with it, how to make it meaningful in the world and meaningful for people's livelihoods and so on. So it's a work in progress, but we just very recently added that on. And a lot of people, when they teach, take Essence and Alchemy or the Wheel, or sell little, or the Aroma Cone, and sell little bits of that in their class, and they like being able to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. And what excites you most about the future of perfumery?
I love seeing people turn on to the materials. I love having the museum. I love that the consumer is more educated, that there are people like you out there teaching them about naturals, that people can get into their lives these very beautiful aromatic materials that have been in every culture across the globe, across time, that have meant so much to us as a species, and that the larger commercial perfume world really doesn't address. And so you just see people finding their way to it and having this very playful, very wonderful time. I noticed a lot during COVID that people wrote me notes about how much it all meant to them. I write notes on all my orders, but people were writing me back. Not only were they buying things, which was wonderful, but they were thanking me and telling me about it in their lives, or taking it to visit their, parents in a memory center. It was just a rich, exciting experience to teach, to make things, to be able to tell the truth about them, to really use rose when you say you're using rose. It's just wonderful. It's just a wonderful experience.
And when you've been making a fragrance or had some sort of brief, can you tell me about a time where it hasn't worked out exactly the way that you thought, and maybe what you did when it didn't work out?
Oh, I've had lots of things that didn't work out. I mean, it's very endless. I'm a reviser, so I expect what I make not to work. I feel like the kind of gateway drug, the gateway in to the fragrance is making anything. So I feel like the way you figure out what you're doing is by doing and by failing. So I'm a big failer. I'm a big person who believes in tinkering and failing and paying attention. I'm always very careful to tell my students, don't listen to, of course, don't listen to anyone. Don't listen to, your relatives or your husband to tell you how good your perfume smells, because they don't know and they love you. They're going to tell you it smells good. You have to work on it yourself. Yeah. You have to figure out what the dynamics are of those materials. So very often I find that along the way, I can't find my way. I have these moments where I think, oh my God, this is really going to never come together. Or sometimes, I don't know if you've had this experience, but I do. I make something for the 20th time, and I go to bed and I think, wow, this is really great. I've really got it. It's really good. And I get up in the morning and I think, maybe not. No. And then I go and do it again. And then I get up in the morning and I think, maybe not. And finally, if a lot of mornings go by and I don't wake up and think, I think I could do better than that. Or what if I had put in 1 drop instead of 4? I like that process. So I've done a lot of formulation for Google. I've done a lot for their School of Leaders. I've done a lot for their schoolhouse, and I've done a lot for their design environment in Milan. I've done different jobs for different people, and I enjoy working. I enjoy working for places where I am making something that fits into their parameters. And I, of course, like making things that come out of my head and I can work on. And I've also had an experience myself, because I don't listen that well, of I've made things and they've had a rocky beginning in the world. Some of my most successful fragrances got terrible reviews, and people said terrible things about them. And they are so successful and so admired and so popular and dear to people. So I do follow my own star, and I expect to fail a lot along the way. I don't know if that answers your question, but that's how I think.
Yeah, you've got to have that attitude where you just kind of keep playing, keep trying, keep experimenting, and keep revising.
Yes.
But yeah, it's interesting talking about parameters, because I think obviously because I'm doing commercial work where there are parameters all the time, I quite kind of like that. But I'm thinking about starting my own range now, and I'm just sort of like, well, where do the parameters like lie around that? So when you actually do design your own fragrances and you've got an idea, do you put any kind of constraints or limits on yourself, like a brief like from Google might do to you?
No, but I have it in my head. So
Okay.
I always, all my perfumes are a conversation between two essences. They're all made that way. I could trace everyone back. So there's two kind of hallmark essences for how I create, and they're usually not near each other on the wheel. They're usually much further apart. So they're in contrast, and there's a feeling. And that perfume has the feeling, and the two essences all have to work together. And then I try to enact that in what I create for the perfume. That's my brief, and that's always my brief. And when I teach, that's my brief. So I'm always working with that, and that's kind of endless. So I had a perfume, mushrooms and tuberose, Seps and tuberose, which was went into a hall of fame, this perfume, but it was really not very well received. And I would read these reviews. What is wrong with Mandy Aftel? Why is she making this, weird perfume with the wild mushrooms, and what's wrong with her, and whatever. And that was all around the fact that those two materials, much as one was this heady, sexy, gorgeous floral, and the other was this kind of deep, chocolatey, earthy, funky, fungusy thing. They had this earthy thing in common. I found in the dry down of the tuberose, there was an earthy facet, and I thought they were talking to each other. I mean, something I could only probably tell you. And I thought, there's just this feeling of the earth and the flowers and how they intermingle with each other and the rot that's there. And so that was kind of in my head with those two materials kind of leading me toward things. And they were so big, the two of them, that the rest of the perfume was really quite simple, because everything was in relation, in artistic connection to the bigness of that combo. And they're not all big, but those two were extremely big, in largeness and smell and in intensity and in meaning. So everything else was kind of a supporting character, kind of helping them and boosting them up. That was what that perfume was about. And I could go back to any of mine and know that.
It's meant building it off those two essences is so interesting. And then I think that in the some of the afternoons when we used to work with you to do the like the evaluations or the version kind of control, and it would be more for me where I would like almost see the scent as like in its entirety, like sort of like a piece of music. So I feel like I sometimes teach with the two options in the masterclass, where people can kind of look at it from building it from just two essences, or then actually like some people can have that abstract way of looking at it, that they kind of do it. So have you ever sort of seen it in its like a scent in its entirety kind of on paper before? Is it always the two and you start playing with those?
So no, I've seen them. Usually there's two that are the leaders, but sometimes the whole formula falls right out of my head. Or at the organ, I just find like I feel kind of guided, and I pick a lot of stuff, and a lot of it's right. Usually some of it's right, but not all of it. And a lot of times for me, it falls apart. It falls apart in the texture. I remember I remember I made these perfumes in this very public way on a blog with like Andy Tower and Dawn Spencer Hurwitz. There was all these other artisanal perfumers, and I talked about my process. And I remember this perfume that I still have. And I had the idea of the smell I wanted, but there was a texture connected to it. There was like a lightness. So a lot of things that had the right smell were too heavy. So I was trying to figure out how to keep this buoyancy with this smell that was in my head. And I kind of think I do have a smell in my head without words, and I'm moving toward, or not moving toward it, but, you know, thinking about moving toward it. And I love that process. I really love it. And in the end, it's like a key fitting in a lock. I know when I'm done.
Yeah.
I know when I've gotten there, and I really know when I haven't gotten there.
Yeah. Do you have any celebratory rituals when you know you have nailed it?
Oh, I'm relieved. I'm always relieved. I always think when I'm in the process, I'm never going to get there. Maybe I should just junk this and start again. I'm always thinking, I'm very unconfident when I really get there and I feel it's good. And also with me, because I have a line, I like the perfume to be a new chapter. So I don't want to have a huge line, and I like it to be a new experience. I don't want to repeat an experience that's in the perfumes already. So it has to have a freshness to it, apart in an identity, apart from things I've already done. So I retire perfumes that are very successful to get them out. So it creates some room for me to make something new and interesting to me.
And in terms of the like numbers of ingredients, I mean, these are just questions that are really personal to me, but I'm thinking, at what point, like, so you're 20 odd years in now, at what point did you kind of move from, say, 9 ingredients to 12 to 15 to 20, like, or is it that you kind of keep it, you know, between, like, how do you decide slowly how much more that you can kind of handle? Because I just find that you know, at the beginning, I used to think that I could handle so many more essences, and there was just this confidence that I had. And then it's like, as I've gotten more into this, I sort of lost some of that. I didn't call it like bolshiness, but it was just like, it was just pure confidence. And I remember one of the things you said to me was, you know, the thing that you want to focus on is probably, you know, making sure that you do take it into other directions to kind of keep experimenting and not kind of just say, oh, I've landed, because I have that clarity. But then, and I'm like, oh, okay, I'm done because I had the clarity. But actually there are all these other ways that I could have taken it, and there might have been even a more magical moment that I might have been able to like find.
I do all that though. Any direction I can think of, I try.
Yeah.
So one of the ways I get to the end is because I fail at all those. So I do that. Oh, how would it have been if I would have tried cumin? Okay, you've got to try it. Like if I get an idea that I think is a good idea, I do it. So I make a lot of versions. I waste a lot of money.
Yeah.
I think the amount of essence that I work with, it's just every time you add more essences into a blend, your ability to control it goes down. Yeah. So, and they increase exponentially. So if you're working with 9, it's easier to control than if you're working with 10. And if you're working with 11, that's, you know, so as you're moving up, because they're so complex, their facets are connecting with one another and making odd stuff, like right in the blend, they're doing weird things with each other or changing the texture. So I usually am very careful. And I also go back over it and say, did I need every single one of these things? Are they, so I look at the essences as doing a job. And so they have to be the best candidate for that job, and that job has to want to be done. So I'm ruthless in getting them back out, and often I do get them back out. I get them in, then I take them back out. I think, you know, you don't really need to be here. You're not doing much. And I never think about an essence, a good reason to put it in is because I like it, or I thought it was a good idea. Like they really have to carry their weight in that blend. And then also, a lot of times when you're making a blend and you're having a lot of trouble, you get this great idea of some other thing you want to do. And I don't do that. I stay, I don't leave. It's just a ruse. I stay with the blend is hard. It's very, I find it a completely interesting process and
Yeah.
humbling,
Yeah.
really humbling.
I just had a client who we changed design midway, and I was like, this is not what's meant to be happening.
Right.
But as it actually turned out, I'm so much more happy, and there's an alignment with the new version. But it was just an interesting experience, the creative brief, because I had started with, you know, strawberry and cardamom, and then we ended up removing the cardamom. So it was like, oh no, like what happened from here to here? But that was part of it, and that was the journey that we took, you know, we've taken together, and we're both really happy with the end result, which is great. Before we just wrap up, I just want to ask you one other question, which is, you know, outside of perfumery, you know, what lights you up?
Well, right now, watercolors.
Yeah.
I love doing the watercolors, which feel a little bit to me like making the perfume. I like what happens with the paint and the colors. I'm very, very interested in learning from this book I have and learning from the museum. I'm very, and my class, all the things I'm doing, I feel like I'm just sort of scratching the surface of with my writing. And with the museum, we have 2 more areas that we have exhibits on. So we've added 2 more kind of big long tables. We moved the smelling outdoors. So that's evolving for me. And I would love to have some more exhibits around taking essences apart and their history. So I'm very engaged with the education at the museum a lot. And I'm very excited that people could have the museum in a book, in a beautiful book to take home. So I just like what I'm doing. And I love the teaching on Zoom. I love what I can do. Maybe someday you'll come. It's all, you know how in class, how you used to make a formula in the morning and then you'd revise it in the afternoon, and you could never connect the two because you didn't have both bottles. Now everybody has everything at once. So the revising process, I feel like I can teach a lot better. Just a lot of things I always wanted to do in that class but couldn't get done. So it's really fun.
So will you ever do more in-person classes, or you think you'll just stay with Zoom moving forward?
I don't think I ever will do more in-person classes, which I think people that have taken the class always feel incredibly disappointed to hear that. And then if they take the Zoom class, then they don't feel that way anymore. And I know just how they feel. Like I have some people in class I'm teaching right now, who some of them, I feel like I need them to like walk around with the sandwich board and say, okay, the Zoom class is better, because I know everyone really liked being in the studio, but try to remember lining up there to get the bottle of rose that somebody else had. Now everyone has a little organ of their own. So if I talk about something, they can smell it right there.
Yeah.
You know, they don't have to wait till somebody can pass them the rose. It's just better. And I'm my same self, you know, I'm not any removed or anything.
Yeah. No, I totally get it, because I don't know. I mean, the world's changed so much and everybody can interact through screens so much better. One of the things I just wanted to show you was I went to this jewelry store to get a ring changed, and the guy, he was a bit of a historian, and he had this book. Oh, it's not going to show.
Which one?
It's
Rimmel. Oh my God, that's the best. It's so good. I have that. I have that book in the museum. Have you taken a look at it yet?
Yeah, taking a little look, but I just wanted
have you
to show
noticed that he's a frustrated hairdresser?
Oh no, I haven't.
Oh, take a look at those illustrations. He has more hairdos in that book than you can shake a stick at. He clearly missed his calling. You know, I have in the museum a set of oils that were discovered in an attic from his perfumery from that period of time. And they have handwritten labels. They were the Rimmel collection. Somebody's grandmother worked there. So I have that in the book there. Wow. And other stuff. That book is fantastic. And he is just fascinating and eccentric as can be.
Yeah. Amazing. Oh, well, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with us and to share all about your passion and your love for life. I'm so, just like the gardening, the watercolors, the perfume, the cooking, all of it. You know, what a rich world that you've created for yourself and for Foster and your family. So thank you very much. And I can't wait to come to class.
I'm so sweet to talk with you and hear all we have in common. And I hope you'll stay in touch and all, and thank you for including me. And I hope, people will find it interesting. And tell me when you put it up so I can share it.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.